I was lucky enough to go to Phase Anatomy, which was a mega game run by Melbourne Megagames a little while ago. I've now got two of their designers, Chris and Leon, here to talk about designing a mega game. First of all, welcome, but can you tell me a little bit about Melbourne Megagames and just briefly what is a mega game if people don't know?
Yeah, so I'm Leon, I'm one of Melbourne Megagames' executive committee. We've been running Mega Games in Melbourne for 5 or 6 years now. Mega Games are large scale, sort of 40 to 60 usually, but anywhere up to 200 players. They take place over a whole day, usually from about 10 a.m. to about 5 p.m. Players tend to play in teams, 4 to 5 people, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more. And as a game, they blend mixture of LARP, where players impersonate characters, dress up, take on unique roles within teams and factions that are quite well designed. Board games, where they go from game space to game space, playing different types of games in each space. And role-playing games where you, as a faction, have a set of objectives that you're trying to achieve, and you're trying to manipulate other players and events in the game in order to try and achieve those objectives.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Chris. I've designed a game with Melbourne Megagames, but have played and been involved in the group for quite a long time now. Yeah, and I think there's quite a variety in settings and themes that Mega Games cover as well. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy and sci-fi themes in Mega Games, but we also tend to fall back on common political tropes as well. So a lot of games will use real-world countries and almost be Model United Nations-esque in the way they run, where countries will be teams of 4 people who are kind of battling it out on a world stage. But maybe the fantastical element that's added is there's an alien invasion, and so Japan is trying to grapple with how they manage aliens landing and their relations with Germany at the same time, you know? So yeah. It's quite a wide variety of experiences.
Because hearing you talk about it, because like a game like June Imperium, for example, you know, there's guilds where you're going up tracks, there's an area control mechanic, there's a deck building element as well. So there's different elements that are coming in to service the game, which sounds similar to when you talk about a mega game with different player roles and different things they can do. But it's not a 90-minute game and it's not 4 players. You've got a whole day and you might, because of the role-playing nature, it might go in different directions than you thought. That sounds like a nightmare to try and, or like a good nightmare or a bad nightmare, but to try to figure out what's going to happen and how to keep people engaged and sort of servicing that story, and that story might change because of player decisions. What is that like to try and design a game like that?
Yeah, the other big element of Mega Games that we didn't mention is that, like a tabletop role-playing game, there's usually a facilitator, or in Mega Games' case, there's usually 10 to 15 facilitators that take on various roles. Some of them will be facilitating specific game spaces, and some will be facilitating the overall game story. And so unlike a board game like June Imperium, where the mechanics are very tightly designed around balance, in a Mega Game context, the mechanics are lighter and necessarily more flexible and less balanced and more open to story manipulation in the way that tabletop role-playing games have mechanics that are manipulatable by narrative progression and story.
And sometimes that progression can be more firmly built into the design of the game. Some games come to us licensed with planned story arcs, and some are a lot more free-form and give the facilitators a quite large scope of control to allow player creativity. So often there'll be a player coming to you with a plot about how to overthrow a leader or gain a technology or something, and whether a facilitator is given license to say, oh, well, give me a reason why that should happen, versus let me spend a bunch of resources to make that happen, really depends on the game that you're playing and how facilitators are set up to manage those players.
Yeah. So often they're almost taking the DM type role, except there's a lot of them in different areas throughout the game.
Yeah, and so there's almost, when you're running those games from an organisational perspective, a staff management capacity to it, or volunteer management in our case, where you have to almost do volunteer training on the side to say, oh, okay, how do we escalate player plots and storylines so that they can be resolved in a way that is satisfying to players and not a nightmare for us to manage internally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From a design perspective, it's quite challenging to find the balance I think a lot of people that come into Mega Games design, they start with, it's kind of like a big board game, and it's often very tightly designed and often doesn't actually scale to the size of a Mega Game particularly well. I think a lot of people's first Mega Game designs are kind of 25-player games that don't really scale up to that sort of 40 to 50 player standard Mega Game size bracket super well. And it's not until you kind of find the breakthrough where you make each mini game within the game simpler, but you add more of them in a way that interconnects in a system where one mini game and another mini game might generate resources that are related to each other and used in the other space. And then you combine that with the sort of scenario design aspect of coming up with factions and factional objectives, which is a lot more like designing an adventure module than it is a game system, actually. That you go, oh, now I have this player that wants this resource over here, and this player that also wants this resource over here, and they're going to compete in that game space, but they might be allied over here because they don't care about this resource much, but then there might be a third team that they both don't like that really likes that resource. And so then you have these like incredibly complicated dynamics that go all over the place.
Or even funnier, when those two players are competing as teams in one sphere, but two players from the same teams are allied in another area, and then when you come together as a team at the end of a round and you work out that you've been working against your own goals, and then trying to rectify all that is a good social outcome for Mega Games, we find.
So having the group Melbourne Megagames, do you find that helpful as designers to draw on experience of others? Because obviously, when you're talking about such a wide sort of, obviously you've all played and enjoy Mega Games, so you're aware of the different elements that go into it. But I imagine there's some people who are better at the, role-playing narrative side of it rather than the board game, mini games areas. Having that team to sort of bounce ideas and work together, is that something you found helpful?
I think Chris and I have quite different perspectives on this because I was the first person in the Melbourne Mega Games community to design a Mega Game from scratch. My experience of it was very much, I played a game that we ran called It Belongs in a Museum, which is a very Indiana Jones Mega Game. And I liked some parts of it, and I didn't like other parts of it mechanically. And I also really like sci-fi, and I like Stargate Universe, and so I came up with the game The Ark. And I mostly did that. I did a lot of it on my own. I did a lot of the structural thinking, the systems thinking on my own, and that kind of worked for me. I bounced a lot of story generation ideas off people, but it wasn't a really structured collaborative design process. But then Chris, several years later, comes along with This City Sucks with, I think, probably a different design.
Yeah, I definitely approached it with some thoughts in mind and visuals that I liked in terms of how I wanted the game to run. I then brought on a co-designer who helped me work through that process, but then pretty quickly went, well, here are the different game spheres, as it is. Who can I get to help me with those? So for my card-based combat system, I went, right, I have a good 10 to 15 friends that are obsessed with Magic the Gathering. You're coming in to balance my card game because that's not what my brain is good at. And I went to other friends to ask about the more board gamey side of it. And I went to my friend who was obsessed with supernatural and other vampire lore from the early 2000s to say, okay, you need to give me the flavor for a bunch of this stuff. And so it was a really collaborative process. And I think that's both a testament to Melbourne Mega Games as a community and the ability for me to draw on those people, and probably the way I work as a designer, where I wanted to really reach out and have help from a bunch of people.
Yeah. As an organisation, when we sort of started, Mega Games, particularly in the UK, have a very strong wargaming background, whereas our community is a lot younger, a lot less interested in war games, and I would say a lot queerer, to be honest. And so we've had a lot of really interesting and wacky game ideas that are coming about at the moment.
Chris and Leon, thank you for coming down and having a chat about what it takes to design a mega game and the different ways that you can do it alone or together, and sort of giving us a bit more insight into the Melbourne Megagames group. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.